Hello, I'm Diana Paton and I'm a Professor of History at Edinburgh University. I'm going to talk today about the cultures that developed under slave society in the Caribbean. There are lots and lots of different elements that we could talk about when thinking about culture. You could talk about music, for instance. You could talk about dance. You could talk about clothing or food. You could talk about the languages that people spoke and the way they organised their families. But I'm going to just focus in on one particular element, which is very, very important in the Caribbean, and that is religion. So let's talk about religion. Quite a number of the enslaved Africans who came to the Caribbean were Muslim, and some were Christian, especially those who came from Congo in West Central Africa. But the majority practiced what historians sometimes call traditional African religions. And these are religions that varied quite widely according to the specific place that they came from, but they did share some characteristics. One characteristic they shared was that the spirit of the ancestors was very important within these religions. People believed that when older people died, they became ancestors and maintained a connection with the present world. And people who are alive today could communicate with them and seek their assistance and make sure that they were kept all right and kept happy. Secondly, these religions included a strong focus on healing and on ideas that you could use spiritual practices to heal people from sickness and from other kinds of affliction. And thirdly, these were very embodied religions. These were religions where using your body to express your religious experience was very important through things like dance and sometimes through possession by the ancestors, where a person becomes possessed by the spirit of the ancestor for a temporary period, or by the spirit of a god. So these kinds of religions were brought to the Caribbean and developed in the Caribbean, adopting some aspects from one another and also from the Christianity that they encountered there. The slave owners were at first not particularly interested in the religions of their enslaved people. They weren't particularly interested in controlling how people acted religiously, so long as people were working, producing the crops, producing the sugar, and so on. But eventually, enslaved people started to use religion to organize against slavery and to organize rebellions. And that happened in particular in Jamaica in 1760, where people used spiritual advice of a person known as an obeah man to organize a really major rebellion. That was met by a very large crackdown by the authorities. So the Jamaican House of Assembly at that point passed a law which made what they called obeah illegal. And that was really a way of making all kinds of Caribbean religion illegal. People were prosecuted under the obeah laws for using their religion to organize rebellions, but also simply for practicing the religion. In later years, Christian missionaries started to arrive in the Caribbean region, and they also very much disliked African religions, not so much because they thought that they were used to combat slavery, but because they thought they were the work of the devil. They thought the worship of ancestors was equivalent to worshipping the devil. So Christian missionaries also really discouraged African religions. What that meant was that African religious practice had to go kind of underground. It became stigmatized, but it remained very, very important, and in fact very much informed the way Christianity developed in the Caribbean. And I think you can see that even today in many Caribbean religions and religions practiced by people of Caribbean descent.